Hello, bold movers. Today I am speaking with the fabulous Michelle Beyo. She's the CEO and founder of Finavator, an award-winning payments and future finance consultancy. Michelle brings 20 plus years of expertise across multiple industries, including payments, loyalty, and open banking. She is recognized as a global thought leader and has spoken on stages worldwide. She's also a board member and the president at Open Banking Network Canada, championing for data rights, transparency, and security in the financial landscape. Michelle, it is so great to see you again, and welcome to the Bold Moves How Did You Know podcast.
I am so happy to be here and excited for this discussion this morning.
Fun fact for the listeners, Michelle and I worked together 8-ish years ago, I think I calculated, at a prepaid FinTech company. And of course, since then, you have gone on to do all of these impressive things that I just spoke about in your bio. I'm so excited to connect with you here. And I hope you'll be spilling all of your bold trade secrets. I'm crossing my fingers on that, Michelle.
I promise. Yeah, no, it was such a pleasure to work with you way back when, and I'm excited for this discussion because I think we've both done a lot of bold moves since our time there.
Definitely. One of the more interesting things about doing these podcast interviews that I've just, over the time come to the realization is that as your career grows and as your personal life grows, you start to see these amazing people doing amazing things and you get to learn from them. And that's what's been really fun about recording these podcast episodes. I'd love to start off by talking about maybe an unconventional topic. So let me cue this up for you and see what you think. Most people learn the rules and they play the game like everybody else. But bold moves start when we reject a rule that everybody else accepts. What was a piece of conventional wisdom or just a standard rule that you came to fundamentally disagree with? And how, if it did, become the seed for Finavator, your company?
Yeah, definitely. So both my parents were entrepreneurs. And when I got into university in the south of France, I have a French passport. I was excited. I'm like, yeah, I got good grades. I want to go into international business in the south of France. I did the application actually in French and got in. And I told my parents, expecting excitement and like moving to the next step. And my parents looked at me, they're like, that's amazing. Congratulations. We don't believe in university. So if you want to go 100%, like just go for it, but we're not paying for it because we don't believe in it. So if you want to be a doctor, a lawyer, we understand why you would want to go to university. But for international business, like just go open a business or go work somewhere and learn something practical and then go apply it. And I was like, what? Like, where was the like lead up to this where I could have spent a lot more time not focused on homework?
Right?
So it was a big shift in my mindset. And I think everyone I knew was going to university. And instead I said, look, like I don't know. I don't exactly want to pay for this. So I took a year off and moved to Australia and took a Canadian work visa and had to switch jobs every 3 months based on the work visa's prescription. We couldn't take a job away from an Australian. So I switched jobs and switched places and lived all over Australia for a year. And it changed my perspective on life in such a dramatic way, I would say.
I can only imagine. And I'm thinking, while everybody else is taking those next steps, the prescribed next steps of like, okay, we just go to college, we get great grades, we study hard, we get a degree, then we go into that field. How did your experience actually inform your mindset around career?
Yeah, I think I realized really early on that it's about the journey, not the destination. Because really, I just wanted to go to Australia for 3 months. I ended up being there for 9, 10 months. And then I went to Australia, like from Australia, because I had a 1 year open-ended ticket. I had to go back through China. But this person I met, she was like, you have to go to Thailand. It's the most amazing place on earth. It's so close to China. You should just go home early, like go to China early and then take a flight to Thailand, Cambodia, Laos, go get your open water dive. So I traveled Asia by myself quite young, and I literally came back on the 365th day of the last day that my flight would let me come home. And I met my husband in Thailand. He was a
Whoa.
Canadian who I worked with at a steak restaurant in Toronto, happened to be in Thailand when I was there, happened to be half an hour away from me, and we happened to send an email and meet up there. So I feel like the world brought me
Mm.
to the other side of the world to truly experience so many different jobs in a year. Like I went from everything from like a barista to a waitress to a marketer to working on a camel farm in the middle of the desert to try and get enough money to get back to the next city. So I felt like I let out that adventure side. It taught me to be really agile and to fail forward for sure.
Oh, now you took your year to travel and have the work experience in Australia. I'm sure there were many twists and turns along the way in getting to where you are today. What would you say was your biggest bold move?
Yeah, so for me, when I got back, I actually went to school for international business, but in college. In Canada, it's cheaper to go to college than university. So I did that, but I did it for 2 weeks, interviewed all my teachers, asked them what businesses they'd opened, what they'd learned, and they were all English majors and science majors and math majors, and none of them had ever worked outside of the academic realm. So I took my money back. So that was kind of bold, and
Okay.
I was working for a cell phone company at the time, and I helped them open 5 franchisees, and I was working in their head office, and this was all through high school. So I think I already knew I was an entrepreneur, but
Yeah.
because my parents told me don't go to university, don't follow the normal path, I actually went and did the opposite. I tried to follow the normal path. I so wanted to follow that corporate ladder that everyone wants to climb. So I literally went after that corporate ladder perspective, but without the university degree, it put me at a disadvantage. So I found that I was always trying to overachieve because I didn't have the degree. And that's what helped me drive my trajectory
Hmm. Hmm.
to get to, you know, the last real corporate job I had was when I worked alongside you, but in the Canadian office. And
Yeah.
I think it just taught me to push. Like, I think what people don't realize is to be bold is to take what is expected of you
Mm-hmm.
and do more than that. So it's always to under promise and over deliver
Hmm.
because your brand is on the line.
Hmm.
And that's where opportunity comes about.
You've just crossed the 6-year milestone of Finavator. So we've talked a little bit about Finavator already, but for the listeners, can you tell them about your business before we start pulling all of the little pieces apart and finding out how you leveled up within Finavator?
Yeah, I'm happy to share. So Finavator was started 6 years ago, and it was largely started because I saw Money 2020 come out with a Rise Up program.
Mm-hmm.
I had met some of the women who won the first year in 2018, and I was so just impressed by these women who had won the first 30 women in the world who had won this, really distinguished honor to be one of these 30 women who got a free ticket to go to the biggest payments conference in the world in Vegas. And so when I applied, I spent a really long time applying to this application. It was very long. And as I was doing it, I was looking back on my career and I kind of realized I've touched so many things of the future of finance, but not many people had done that, especially
Mm-hmm.
across different industries. So my background in total is I spent 6 years in telco, 8 years in online shopping, affiliate marketing. I ran Alaska, Lufthansa, Delta United online shopping mall platforms back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
And then I moved into payments and worked for the organization in Atlanta focused on prepaid infrastructure.
Mm-hmm.
I helped launch the first ever reloadable prepaid program in Canada. I helped launch the first digital card infrastructures for, Apple and Google on like a gift card mall. And then I launched WeChat for this company at 7-Eleven as a test
Mm-hmm.
pilot in 2017. And it was the first ever WeChat launch in North America. And it was running through a prepaid rail, through a QR payment. And I kind of went, oh my God, this is the future of finance. And
Mm-hmm.
North America has not got there yet.
Mm-hmm.
And then I left. I went to a blockchain company focused on digital identity, focused on consent on blockchain for GDPR compliance in the UK. but out of Toronto. And I learned so much about blockchain and digital identity. And when I won Money 2020 Rise Up, they called me on July 1st, and I didn't want to give the PR to this blockchain company because I've learned everything what to do in a startup and everything never to do in a startup in that year. Blockchain went through crypto winter in
Mm-hmm.
2018, 2019. So I literally looked at my husband and said, I have to start a company today because I don't want the PR to go out under someone else.
Yeah.
So I created Finavator literally on July 1st, 2019, and called Money 2020 back and said, I'm actually the CEO of Finavator. I just felt like everything I've ever learned has been a part of the future of finance, and many people are still struggling to understand digital identity or challenger bank infrastructure
Mm-hmm.
or online shopping interconnections with payments. So here I went on my journey.
What I'm hearing as you talked about all of these different experiences that has now kind of informed what you do with Finnovator, you looked back across your experiences and you looked for the patterns and then also the gaps. It sounds like you were existing in payments and fintech in multiple regards now over all of these different experiences. And that company's doing something, but that company's doing something different. And that company, and then it was like, how do I put all of these together to deliver it in a way that is going to help these companies actually be better prepared for the future of finance?
Yeah, I didn't know anybody who was a consultant, so I didn't know the consultant world. I just knew that I'd worked for a company for 3 years or 8 years or 6 years, and you're all your eggs are in one basket,
Mm-hmm.
essentially. And what I realized is so many people don't understand how to connect to a fintech and white label it and give their customers a new experience. I was finding the through
Mm-hmm.
line of the fact that instead of me helping one company get to the future of finance, I could help multiple companies get to the
Okay.
future of finance and simplify the future of finance, hence the masterclass,
Yeah.
because Asia's already there. Brazil's already there. We need to catch up for the sake of our consumers.
The industry expertise around finance and fintech, maybe newer subjects for bold movers who come from all different types of experiences, types of jobs and backgrounds, etc. But I love that we can all see how you collected these experiences and were able to look at your background and understand the market and how you could deliver in a way that could be valuable to your audience. I host a Bold Moves dinner, which is a really fun offshoot of these conversations that we're having. I get to have them in real life with people who listen to the podcast who are making their own bold moves. And this last one was in Seattle. We were talking about there's this initial excitement of the leap of a bold move, right? You're getting into it, you're getting started, you're getting some traction out the gate. And it's exciting, but then there's the marathon of sustaining it. And not long after we had that conversation at the dinner, a friend of mine shared a graphic on social media that represented the small business journey. And this graphic shows this emotional journey, this roller coaster where you peak high at excitement at the start, and then it's followed by this plunge into what it calls the trough of sorrow before a slow and bumpy climb towards success again. And I'd love to walk you through that journey and get your experience going through each phase, because now we're not just talking about how to make a bold move, but we're actually talking about the journey of a bold move, right? And there's all of these different various ups and downs and bumps and pivot points along the way. And I think it would be really cool to hear how somebody actually went through this journey and came out the other side. So, Michelle, if you're game, I would love to start by asking you not about the initial excitement of making your bold move. We kind of touched on that already. But the next little point in their graphic was a dose of reality. So, do you remember a time in your bold move where you got a dose of reality and what that moment meant for you and what it looked like?
Yeah, no, totally. I say to people, success is not linear. Like
Mm-hmm.
there is linear is stable. Stable is great. Like if you want a mortgage and like long-term success with maybe a pension, that's like the linear journey. But if you want to be an entrepreneur, it is literally a roller coaster. And you have to be conscious with the highs and conscious with the lows. And I'm so grateful that before I even share this, thankfully, I was already into yoga. And aside from yoga, I was already into meditation. So you cannot be a founder without having some type of
Mhm.
like being a surfer or like just
Mm.
having something. Like it could just be as simple as like coffee with a girlfriend.
Yeah.
But you need grounded
Yes.
behavior that will be stable while you are not stable, because like it is literally the roller coaster. So my first run out of the gate was risk on risk, right?
Mm.
Like might as well just start my own company, which was in July. And then I'm like running through 6 months of my first 6 months of running Finavator.
Right.
And I'm at events and I'm doing this thing and I've picked up my first clients, and COVID hits in March, right? So
Mm.
6 months into me having a company, I'm basically sitting in COVID in my basement with two kids virtually learning upstairs, and they were much younger 6 years ago, and trying to navigate that and literally be in my office. But I think that the thing that happens in the low
Mm.
that I'm very lucky to say is I had a lot of friends worried they were going to be fired. So they literally went
Mhm.
into every day of that
Mm.
nervousness, that nervous energy. You're
Mm.
not in control. Where I was looking at it like, look, I'm by myself,
Mhm.
but at least I'm in control of my journey. Like
Yep.
I can make the decisions and I could choose the energy that I'm looking at this from and the lens I'm looking at it from. And
Yeah.
I looked at it and I said, you know what? Why don't I just focus on the US? I know I live in Toronto. I've worked,
Mhm.
most of my business life I've worked with the US, and it really
Mhm.
worked out. One of my
Mhm.
first clients was in New York. I didn't meet them in person for a year and a half due to
Yes.
restrictions on
Mhm.
like travel, but it was in prepaid. It was focused on launching a prepaid program. They needed an expertise. They didn't care that I couldn't come in person because nobody could come in person. And it really helped me kind of make Finavator more North American. And it was the bold move I made in the low
Mhm.
moment. But
Mhm.
I think it's about just really keeping a positive lens, because
Mm.
you're the one as the entrepreneur. No one can pull the rug under you. You can lose a client, but as long as you have the same vision of what you want to create, it's a pivot
Mm.
left or a pivot
Mhm.
right. Even if you hit the floor, you just get up faster in a more polite way than you might have the first 5 times you hit the floor.
Two things that hit me as you were talking, and thank you, because I hadn't thought about it in this way before and had the words for it like you just shared with us. The grounding exercise that is just your stable place while you're going on the bold move journey is really helpful and important. And I can see in my life too how I do those things. Like I exercise basically every day. I try not to let the overwhelm of all the work or what I want to do or whatever force me outside of doing that. It just kind of stays as that consistent habit and practice that I have. So it's a great takeaway for listeners to identify what your grounding thing is every day or every week so that you can better ride the highs and the lows of the journey. And then the other thing that you said, and it's been on my mind too, especially as everybody is unfortunately going through the layoffs, and it just kind of feels like we're in an environment now where just layoffs are a part of your career experience. I would 30 years ago, or when my dad was working, I mean, layoffs really weren't part of the conversation. You would just be a tenured employee and you would have a stable job and everything would be great if you just showed up and you did your job and and you did that for 30 years. But now it's just every 6 months, we were getting another round of layoffs from companies. And that does cause a lot of anxiety with people who rely on that for their paycheck.
Yeah, I think living in a fear is a really challenging
Hmm.
position,
Hmm.
because when you're living in fear, anything can dysregulate you or get you into a place of panic or financial panic. And don't get me wrong, there's a
Hmm.
lot of fear out there,
Hmm.
but you have to protect yourself, especially as an entrepreneur. I think it's really crucial that you find a way to remove the noise. as much
Yeah.
of the noise as possible and focus on the family and the business,
Mm,
and then, let in a little of the
mm,
noise, but
mm,
don't let it determine what you do. You obviously have to know
mm.
what's happening in the market so that you can pivot, but
Yeah.
reading more than 5 minutes of news a day is probably not ideal as an entrepreneur.
I was about to ask, where is the noise for you? So it sounds, is the noise coming from the news more or less? What other sources of noise exist for you?
Yeah, so the only platform I'm on is LinkedIn because I feel like that's my community.
Yeah.
Um, but there's noise in the world between, in Canada and the US, we actually have some tariff challenges, but I don't focus on it because I know we're going to figure it out. Like people are
Mm,
focused and fear based on it. I'm like, it will
work
work
out.
out. I'm not in charge of it. So I think my rule is if I can't fix it personally, I can't focus on it. I can know
Mm,
about it, but I can't focus on it.
mm. That's a good rule.
Because
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there's a lot going on
Mm-hmm.
around the world. I have friends in a lot of places that are in challenge at
Yeah.
the moment, and I think you just got to focus on what you can control and the beauty and love that you can push out into this world with innovation and what you're able to do. Don't
Mm-hmm.
focus on the risk or focus on the fear, because
Yeah.
you'll never innovate if you live in
In
that
that
moment
place.
all the time. You're obviously going to feel it eventually, but some people don't feel in control, right? And when you don't feel in control, then that's kind of focused on the fear.
All right, so I'm going to move us to the next dip in this trough of sorrow. And there is where we get into experimenting and pivoting. So, where did you or what did you experiment with in your business, and what pivots resulted from those experiments?
Yeah, I think people experiment when things shift, right? So I can tell you SVB crashing or having a moment, if we want to give it a different name, back in March of 2023, it changed the financial landscape for fintechs
Mm-hmm.
around North America,
Mm-hmm.
largely because they didn't have a runway. They knew they couldn't get funding. All the funding moved from financial services and fintech
Mm-hmm.
largely over to AI. So a lot of these fintechs were struggling to survive, and two of my clients went under within 30 days of March 2023.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't expecting it. They were
Mm-hmm.
pretty well funded,
Mm-hmm.
but they knew they couldn't get their next round, and they basically shut down. So through that experience, I had just hired an IB student who was focused on financial services, and I didn't want to let her go. And I said, what do you know about payments? She's like, nothing. I'm like, what do you know about prepaid? She's like, what's prepaid? What do you know about BaaS? Nothing. Digital identity? No. I'm like, so you just came out of an IB program, but you have no grasp of any of the future of finance things because they're not embedded in
Mm-hmm.
that ecosystem. It was an
Mm-hmm.
MBA program.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, you know what? We'll just do an Ask Me Anything Monday, and we'll start with prepaid because it is like the innovation rail. It
Sure.
literally is touching so many fintechs, buy now, pay later, and beyond. And so I was like, okay, ask me anything. Let's record it. Okay, turn it into a deck. Okay, turn it into a quiz. Wait, turn it into a one pager, like a cheat sheet. And
Mm.
then turn it in, like find articles that help you understand it better. And then let's change the deck, and then let's just turn this into a masterclass. By the
Ah.
time I was like, if I just train you, I'm only helping one person understand the future of finance. And then I found friends all around the world that had been on stages with me to be an interview.
Mm.
So
Mm-hmm.
really, I pivoted to create a masterclass to really fulfill now I don't have to train all of my new staff. I could just have them take the masterclass. And when I'm working with clients and we're working on an innovation
Mm.
project, what I found over the last 6 years is sometimes that project doesn't go to the finish line because people in different departments
Mm-hmm.
don't understand what
Mm-hmm.
this opportunity is or what it looks like. And now I can have them get some masterclass licenses and get accounting and marketing and their board and other people aligned to the future of finance because we go through open data, digital identity, cybersecurity, Web3, blockchain, cryptocurrency, CBDCs, plus the prepaid BaaS embedded finance world. So I feel like it's like helped me bring the company to the next level and bring the industry along with me.
Wow. So, a couple things for listeners. If you are interested in the future of finance, you should take Michelle's Future of Finance Masterclass. And I can link that in the show notes for anybody who might be interested. I did want to circle back on the SVB that you spoke about. Okay, so for listeners who aren't familiar with finance or banking or payments, that is a bank that, and Michelle, maybe you can give better context than I can here, but that was a bank based in Silicon Valley that a couple of years ago shut down kind of overnight. It was very quick, I think.
Yeah, I'll give some context. They didn't fully shut down. What
Oh,
happened was there was a run on the bank. Someone
okay.
they had actually bought a 10-year yield
That's
with
right.
a lot of their money with the government. And because the interest rates were changing, that yield wasn't going to flourish
Mm-hmm.
and it was too much money. And their compliance officer left 9 months earlier when she raised this concern and nobody seemed to
Uh-huh.
address it.
I see.
And someone found out that their compliance officer left and this yield challenge,
Mm.
and fintechs started pulling their money, and then other fintechs, and then it became a thing, and then everybody pulled their money.
Yep.
And then being a run on the bank, people were lined up, like they supported a lot of different
Yep.
companies. It was a major challenge. Like it was just like it was a whole market
Mm-hmm.
shift that literally occurred due to this challenge, and they actually got purchased. So SVB still
Okay.
lives, but SVB was one of the biggest banks that was investing in fintech
Mm-hmm.
and prop tech
Mm-hmm.
and insure tech,
Mm-hmm.
so even in Canada. So
Right.
when they crashed, it literally changed the whole dynamic of fintech.
It's so interesting to think about how these events actually have that sliding doors effect on your career, because had that not happened, maybe you wouldn't have created the masterclass, right? Which
Most
was,
likely.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so when we start looking at this graphic, this representation of the roller coaster of what it means to be an entrepreneur, you eventually get to a place where it starts working and then you scale. So how did the masterclass, how was it perceived, and how did you know it was working, and was that the launch pad for the next evolution of Finavator?
Yeah, I can tell you that I'm a little bit of a recovering perfectionist. So I spent 9 months, I call this my third child, building this masterclass. And I had
Mhm.
to HTML code the back end, and there was a lot of things I had to learn how to edit, and I had a whole production team. It was a thing. I
Okay.
wanted it to be the best quality thing I could put out there. It was my name. So I learned a whole bunch of new skills. I think when anything makes you extremely nervous, like you feel like you might want to throw up, that's the thing you should be doing. Like
I
before it was
relate.
me, right?
Mhm,
It's
mhm.
before it was me getting on stage made me extremely nervous and uncomfortable. But then I found getting off stage was the most incredible feeling that
Mhm.
you were able to share and bring people to the knowledge. It's the same thing with this masterclass. Like I was nervous, I was stressed, I wasn't sure, but I just put my best effort forward and kept learning new things along the path. And then when I finally had the product out and I launched it, I realized I had to sell it. It wasn't just like build it and they will come. You have
Yeah,
to
of
actually
course.
tell people
Mhm.
this thing exists. And then I went out, and the first 6 months was trying to get it accredited, which I did in
Mm,
Canada for all wealth managers. So it's 6 of their 10 hours if they want to get it to get towards their every 2 year certificate. I got it accredited in Europe, and I'm still attempting to get it
mm.
accredited in the US. But what I realized is like master classes are great, but unless you could figure out a way that not only can they write it off through their HR education, which
Mhm.
is great, so that was a good check, but then getting it deeper, like
Mhm.
into some type of accreditation. So I had to learn the whole accreditation
Wow.
ecosystem and what does that mean. So I
Mhm.
think when you start something new that
Mm.
pushes you forward, if you believe in it, you'll continue to push yourself forward and continue to learn. And I think my aha moment was I had a gentleman in Singapore who worked at Citi for 20 years, who's now in DeFi and blockchain, and he's seen the world. Like
Yeah.
he's been in finance from like the beginning to the crazy now. And he said it was the best course he'd ever taken, and did a whole like
Wow.
review video on it. And he's like, "You're kind of the master chef, and you're teaching me little aspects that are like helping me see this whole landscape." And it was the biggest
Brilliant.
compliment I think I could have ever received. And
Mm.
I think people, when they push themselves, there is validation, but it's the nervousness of not wanting to fail forward,
Mm.
because we never want to
Mm.
fail.
Mhm.
But I think what we don't realize is Amazon fails forward, Uber fails forward. Everyone has to take a risk and then iterate.
Mm.
But that's the only way to grow.
I'm just letting all of that sit in and marinate because we haven't had a chance to dive into what it actually looks like to be in a business and keep pushing yourself forward to pivot or scale up. And I think what you just shared was an amazing case study and how somebody does that. And, as you said, not letting the fear hold you back and being open to failing forward. It's almost like it brings me back to this question that we examined in the first phase of the podcast about how to make a bold move. A lot of us before, as we're evaluating, we know we want to do something different, or bolder than what we've done. We have a dream, but a lot of times in our minds, we are wired for the worst case scenario, right? And I think what I've learned from bold movers in that phase is you can also think about what's the best that could happen. And when you start to think that way, that's when you get outside of the fear and into the opportunity.
Fully agree with that. And I think there's some book, like this book,
Yeah.
I have to recommend, Angela Duckworth's Grit.
Yeah.
You can listen to it audio or you can read it. But I was still working at the company you were working at in 2017. And I read this book over the holidays, like just before New Year's. And it's saying that if you do 10,000 hours of anything, you could become an expert. Playing a violin, not really my thing, but speaking became that thing. I basically set out 10 goals every January. I know everybody does their goals, but it's literally 10 things, and I try and make sure some are personal, some are business, and I go back through that list any day that I'm having a down day where I'm feeling concerned or like, why have I done this? You have that moment, you pull out that notebook, and my that notebook basically says success is freedom. And in that notebook is my 10 goals of the year, and I check them off as I go. Obviously, I don't do all 10 every year, but some get moved to the next year, some just drop because it was a moment in time. But I truly believe in KPIs. I believe in having 3 goals as a company. I believe that we need goals. If we don't have them, we don't feel in control. So I think pushing yourself to write down these goals and look at them makes your brain conscious of what am I
Yeah.
trying to achieve here? What is that one thing that's going to push me out of my comfort zone that I'm going to do this year? You don't have to jump out of a plane, but you could put yourself up for a panel, or you could put
Yeah.
yourself up for an award, or you could try and get this new client, or you could put yourself up for a new role. Like, it doesn't have to
I
be
love that.
massive, but you have to push yourself,
Yeah,
because that's how we grow.
that's a great tip.
Yeah.
You just talked a lot about the theme of success, and I am always curious to ask bold movers how they define success, because in a lot of ways, the narrative, and it's still true in entrepreneurship, and what you see, unfortunately, also drives this narrative, which is the only way you're a success is if your company succeeds, you make multi-million dollars, you have a huge staff, and yeah, you're living life in your personal life. You're on a yacht outside of Capri, Italy, for example, right? That is
Yes.
a version. I've just described one of the most popular versions of what success might look like if you were just reading the media or studying entrepreneurship or whatever. But I really want to get into success as impact. And so, how have you thought about the impact you're making, and how do you tie that to success?
Yeah, I think 2 things. I think that's the 1 percentile, right? So it's a very
Mm-hmm.
unrealistic goal. 98% of all businesses in most countries are small to medium-sized businesses. So to me, it's not always financial freedom, though that is the goal. Sometimes you do a lot of things because you just want to get them done. But for me, it's freedom.
Mm-hmm.
No one can tell me that when my kids have something, I have to be in this city or I have to go do this, because I'm the CEO of Finavator and I'm going to put my family first and I'm going to basically work around what I need to. Versus when I worked for a
Mm-hmm.
corporation, I had to be where I had to be, fully understandable. So for me, it's freedom. especially with kids
Mhm.
and being a mom. And I
Mhm.
do travel a lot, so don't get me wrong, but I do try and bring my kids and my husband with me.
Mhm.
Um, it's working, having the right to work with clients that I align to,
Mhm.
very purpose based. I
Mhm.
want to work with people that want to drive innovation, that
Mhm.
see that the growth of innovation comes from multiple different aspects. I love to get on panels, but I only want to get on panels if it's going to have diverse voices on the panels,
Mhm.
because women and men see products from different angles, and
Mhm.
us together, like as a 50-50, is giving the perspective that gives the most well-rounded discussion. I believe that boards should be 50-50. Like
Mhm.
that's kind of one of my core values. So you'll see that most of my clients have a
Mhm.
lot of diversity in the sense of voices at the table. Like one of the companies that wanted to hire me, I'd be the only female. And I was like, never doing that again. And they literally went out and hired 50% of their executive team to be really high end women, like some former CMO from Pepsi in
Mhm. Mhm.
Canada, someone from capital markets that was a female VP that came over. When I worked for that blockchain company, I said, look, I know nothing about blockchain. I know nothing about digital identity. If you want me to leave this safe and secure job because you see
Yeah.
something in me and you want me to come do this with you, I'm not going to go do it as the only female in the room. Like that's just
Mhm.
not going to work out. So
Mhm.
the CEO went out and hired these
Mhm.
people
Mhm.
and then asked me again. And I was like,
Mhm.
well, absolutely. Your intention is true. And it really helped vibe what we were
Mhm.
creating.
Mhm.
So I think you have to really understand what makes you thrive and
Mhm.
what makes you feel aligned, like you're contributing and you're contributing with purpose. And, there's
Yeah.
some clients I didn't want to work with back in the days in corporate world, but you had no choice. Now, if there's a client that just doesn't align, you're able
Yeah.
to step away because you're doing this because you chose to do this. And yes, you want the financial freedom, but you also want that core purpose. Like, I want
Yeah.
my kids to want to work at my company one day. So I'm trying to
Yeah.
create that environment.
For them. My bold movers audience are at many different stages in their bold moves, but a lot of them are maybe newer entrepreneurs who are starting small businesses or consultancies, and they always have a question about how do I, or if they're getting started, maybe they're transitioning out of corporate. The question is, how do I find my first few clients? Do you have any insight to share with them to help them along and get that initial journey going?
Yeah, I'll say two things. As an entrepreneur, you have to go out to conferences. In person interaction is one of the most authentic ways to meet new people, to get them to understand who you are, what you're all about, why they should work with you. If you follow me on LinkedIn, you can see I'm at like 20 conferences a year, but that's because my clients are there. That's because I'm able to, eventually through the years, I was able to get on stages and share
Mhm.
my voice
Mhm.
of thought leadership at the same time that I would meet. Like when I go to Money 2020 or any of these conferences like FinTech Meetup or South, a lot of FinTechs in the name, I'm booking 20 to 30 meetings over the 3 days. I'm not just going to listen to the content or be the content. It is a constant
Mm. Mhm.
interaction of meeting new people. Maybe that's to know them. Maybe that's because you're going to do content with them. Maybe that's because they're going to be your client.
Yeah.
Nothing is immediate.
Yeah.
Everything is for the long term. I've
Yeah.
built a very
Good.
big network, but that's because I let in a lot of meetings to
Mhm.
figure out what they're up to, what their synergies are,
Mhm.
how can I
Mhm.
help them, how could they help
Mhm.
me. Maybe there's nothing there, but I'm willing to take the meeting to find out. So I
Mm.
think you have to, if you want to go out on your own, you have to be uncomfortable or comfortable with going and networking.
That could be somebody's small, bold move for the year is going to one conference this year. Thank you, Michelle. My last question for my guest is, what is one piece of advice you have to keep momentum going and courage going when that initial excitement fades and the real work begins?
Yeah, I think you need to create your own. Some people call it their board
Mm-hmm.
or their virtual board. I
Okay.
think as an entrepreneur, life is can be quite lonely. right? No one knows your problems. No one, like, you might have staff, but they're not the CEO. So, and with your husband or partner or wife, you want to keep that separate to a certain degree. Like, we learned how to keep work separate a
Mm.
very, very long time ago, so that when I'm done this, I can go live that life, like balance. So I think finding people within the industry, like I have a friend I meet almost every Monday for a walk or a
Mm.
glass of wine or a phone call if we're in different places, just because we're in different sides of it, but we've changed roles, and it's just a good way to talk out what's happening
Yeah.
with the industry, what you're up to, just to decompress.
Mhm.
And it could be a yoga class. It could be, we have some Rise Up members here in Toronto. We meet like twice a year for lunch.
Yeah.
Just have an outlet,
Yeah.
because when you're out on your own,
Hmm.
you don't have the same office environment. And some days can be quieter, and you need
Yeah.
to keep yourself focused and vent a little bit every once in a while too. So get
Yes.
your circle of friends and keep them close. And they might not be your closest friends, but they understand the same industry you're in. So they might be in marketing or,
Hmm.
whatever you're working at. That's why you go to the conferences,
Hmm.
make new friends,
Hmm.
create some cadence, have some coffees.
Love that. That is the perfect place to end off, Michelle. Thank you so very much for coming on to the Bold Moves How Did You Know podcast. Where can people find you? They should absolutely follow Michelle on LinkedIn. She's sharing all the good work she's doing. And so, yeah, where can they find you?
So you can definitely find me on LinkedIn. You can follow Finavator so that you can get our newsletters. If you are going to take the masterclass, I'll send a 25%
Oh,
discount
that'd be
called
awesome.
Bold Moves for anybody within the network. And then honestly, if there's a FinTech or payments conference happening in the US or Canada, I'm most likely speaking at it. So come
Yes.
and say hi.
Michelle, thank you again so much for being here. It was awesome. And to everybody else, we will see you in the next episode. Bye for now.